Bruce Plourde, American Studies. Do you know how to cite secondary sources in a paper?
A little bit. I have trouble doing it.
Would you like to know more?
Yes.
Citing and documenting sources is a necessary part of writing an academic paper. If you cite or document your sources carelessly, or if you don't document them at all, you put yourself at risk of committing plagiarism, and that's a big no-no. Learning how to cite and document sources requires a small investment of time, but once you have the basics, you'll know how to do most kinds of citations. To document your sources properly, you should keep a list of sources that you consult while you are writing your papers. Having that list will mean that you don't forget any when it's time to write your Works Cited page. That Works Cited page will contain a list of all of your sources in alphabetical order by the author's name. If you know what the Works Cited page contains for information, then you should have an easier time of keeping track of your sources while you're writing your paper. For the proper form in MLA Style, you would want to follow this general pattern. The first thing is the author's name, last name first name last, any initials, and then a period. What comes next is the title of the work. Let's make it easy for now and say that the source that you're using is either a book or an article. The title of the book or the article comes next. Book titles and any major work should appear in italics, while journal articles and less dense materials should appear in quotation marks. The title should be followed by a period. Notice that the period lies within the quotation marks for the article citation. Next comes the publication information. For a book, the next thing that comes is the publisher of the book. If the publishing house is called W.W. Norton, for example, then you would write W.W. Norton after the title. If you're dealing with a journal, then the name of the journal goes in that spot after the title of the article. If your source is a journal, then you'll also want to include as much information as possible about the time when your journal came out. Usually you can find information about the month and the year, and sometimes you can include the volume and number for that article. Next comes the time of publication. We just covered the journal article, but if we're talking about a book, then you would just give the year of publication right after the comma. So, W.W. Norton, comma, 1988, period. Okay, now just one more detail. If you're documenting a journal article, you'll want to specify the range of page numbers for the article. If the article begins on page 27 and goes to page 44, then you would include that range as simply 27-44 just after the date of the journal article. Also, you may notice that the second line of the citation is indented 5 spaces. That's called a hanging indentation, and you should use it just for the Works Cited page. In fact, if you format your paragraph in a word processing program, you should see an option for hanging indentations under the place where you would format your paragraph. And that's it for books and journals. And just know that there are any number of variations other than books and journals. Most of your sources should come from books and articles, but you may also have internet sources. For those, you'll be adding the URL, or the web address, and the date that you access the page, since web pages tend to change periodically. But the basic information, regardless of the form of your source, is author, title of work, publisher, date. And given the differing forms, you may have to add specific information for your source. This same general approach applies to web pages, chapters in books, newspaper pieces, videos, and any other source of information. If you find some relevant information written on the side of a 3-legged otter, I'm sure that you can find a way to cite that. If you come across a source that you're not familiar with, or if you just want to confirm that you're documenting your source correctly, you can go to the Purdue University website that offers clear instructions on how to document anything. The website is entitled MLA Formatting and Style Guide, OWL, Purdue University, and the website is listed here on the top of the page. Other than Purdue OWL, there are any number of academic websites that can walk you through your citations. Also, you can find a number of programs that can do the Works Cited page for you. These apps are handy, but you should know how to do it first so that you can check the application's work for accuracy. When you find a good quotation that you want to include in your paper, you have two ways of sharing it. The first way is to quote it word for word, as we have here. This is the safest way to cite sources because there's no question about what the author said. Also, as we see here, you should find a way to embed the quotation smoothly into your own narrative and then simply put quotation marks at the beginning and the end of the part you want to quote. For example, here it says, "If it's true that Jones has seriously undermined the legacy of racism in America, then he has also undermined the legacy of white supremacy." That quotation doesn't interrupt what's going on, it simply takes part in the ongoing narrative and allows the narrative to continue smoothly. Then, in parentheses, after the quotation, include the author's last name and the page number of where the quotation is. You don't need any punctuation between the name and the number. The other way of sharing a source is to paraphrase it, and this can be a little more tricky. A paraphrase doesn't need quotation marks because you're taking the idea that you got from your source and putting it completely into your own language. If you are paraphrasing, be sure that you don't include any apt phrase that belongs to the author. It has to be your own version of the idea. Also, when you paraphrase, be sure that you give credit to the author for that idea. A parenthetical citation would work best. You don't need to include the author's full name and the full name of the article because that's just a waste of space, and all that information will appear on the Works Cited page anyway. When you cite your sources properly, you are indicating to your reader that you've done the necessary work to review the ongoing conversation about the topic you're writing about. Professors really like to see that students have used sources well because it shows that you're capable of good, honest work, and that is always appreciated.
So that should get you started with citing secondary sources.
Okay.